We are listening to previously recorded testimony in the courtroom of the Jeffrey Willis trial. They are on lunch break right now. That was Dawn Schmidt. She was the witness who heard who had the victim, and just to be clear, because the super underneath said the victim ran to her house, this is another victim. There are 3 alleged victims. One of them he was already convicted for the murder of. That victim he's going to stand trial for. And then we have this victim, Jessica Kranz, who he's currently on trial for. With me, I have our criminal defense attorney guest, Kenney Baden. Thank you for joining us. Now, what do you make of this testimony? This is pretty interesting. They are bringing in testimony from another case, a case that is pending to stand trial with a victim, another victim, a different victim to help prove this case. Why is the judge allowing that?
This is so important. This witness for the prosecution is so important. And if I'm the defense attorney, I'm like dying. Just put me under the table right now. You may not be able to find me, okay? All right? Because even though it's a sandwich of different cases. We have Blesh. We have Harenga that they're hearing about. Now we're hearing that this may be the most unluckiest defendant in the world, or he is guilty as sin.
Certainly not likable.
Because he's not likable. This witness here, why it doesn't connect Willis to the crime. It will by when we have Madison Nygaard on, the woman who was actually attempted to be kidnapped or kidnapped for a period of time, because she is talking about how terrible this young teenager was at the time she ran into her house. Blood, hair, a clump of hair pulled out on the floor. I mean, she can't be calmed down. He has a gun. It is awful.
She's setting the stage to paint the character of Jeffrey Willis, the defendant, and I'm surprised that the defense, unless they did probably beforehand, object that this is coming in. I mean, this testimony is prejudicial, arguably, as a defense attorney, but I assume that the judge feels like it's more relevant and probative to prove a common scheme. And what's interesting is that this victim, or alleged victim, because this trial hasn't occurred yet.
Well, she's a victim no matter what, depending on who did it.
Right.
She is a victim.
That's true. So she's the one that ID'd Jeffrey Willis, which then led to linking these other crimes. Let's throw to the 911 call of this witness who called 911 when this third victim had her own escape attempt from Jeffrey Willis, and then we'll come back and recap and dissect this more here. This is Jeffrey Willis's second trial. He was convicted in November for the murder of Rebecca Blech, and he is now facing trial for the murder and disappearance of Jessica Kranz. Awaiting trial also for the kidnapping of the witness you just heard testimony for in that 911 call. That is a teen, Madison Nygaard, that was abducted and held at gunpoint by allegedly Jeffrey Willis. Quick reaction, Linda, to this. What do you make of this explosive 911 emotional cry?
I was ready to cry here. I don't know about you. I'm sure the viewers are. And imagine the effect on the jury as they're sitting watching him. And Willis is very cold and calculating. And if you watch, he's very much in control of himself. And you compare that poor woman to the controllers of Willis. That jury has to be hating him right now.
Right. I am sure. Well, he's not a likable guy. No. That's for sure. I mean, we have an unlikable guy. We have a trial without a body and minimal DNA and a whole lot of circumstantial evidence that that the prosecution is using and building to connect the dots to try to prove this case beyond any and all reasonable doubt. Do you think the prosecution can meet its burden?
I think so. Sometimes a circumstantial case can be better than a direct evidence case, because if you just have an eyewitness identification alone, we all know that those can be not valid. But when you have an eyewitness identification and you have the call and you have the truck and you have the immediate identification, then it becomes a whole different story. Plus the other 2 possible murders, 1 murder and 1 missing body.
Right. So let's go back to this 911 call and see what else that this victim has to say that could help connect the dots on why Jeffrey Willis is also guilty of this murder of Jessica Kranz. Let's take a look. You're listening to the 911 call of Madison Nygaard when she was allegedly abducted by the defendant, Willis, who is now on trial for murder of another victim, Jessica Kranz. Quick reaction, Linda. What do you make of this hysterical call, which is a little hard to understand? And they kept showing the video of the defense attorney's table and the defendant himself. What do you make of their reaction, of their body language?
Well, Willis, again, is that cold, calculating person that we don't like. It's interesting. As a defense attorney, once I had to cross-examine a psychiatrist, and he was telling me that when people get nervous, they do this sometimes. Did you see the defense attorney take a swig of water? It's right.
We'll have to rewind that and find that to replay for the viewers. Once again, we have viewers here live on the network. We're live in the courtroom, and we have listeners on Sirius Radio. We're going to take a quick break, but stick with us as this trial unfolds.
I'm Amy.
You are listening to previously recorded testimony of Madison Nygaard, the victim who was allegedly abducted and held at gunpoint by the defendant, Jeffrey Willis, in this case. It is a very, very riveting case that we're listening to, and there's much more testimony. For those of you just joining us, Madison Nygaard is another victim who's waiting to stand trial, or who's bringing charges against this defendant who's waiting to stand trial for her kidnapping charge, which is helping to link this murder case with Jessica Harenga. We've heard from all sorts of experts, DNA experts, computer forensic experts, her boyfriend, his ex-wife, a plethora of other witnesses, and now another victim. I have Linda joining me here, criminal defense attorney on set. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Krista.
What do you make of all of this? How is this going for the defendant?
Well, you see, it's very interesting how you have to have all the evidence in the case, because if you just heard her testify right now, she's very calm, and she's not really saying anything that hurts Willis. He pulled up, and his story, because he testified in the previous trial, is that he was just trying to help her. But because you had that 911 call where she's frantic, you know that he's not trying to help her, in my opinion. I mean, he hasn't been found guilty, and this is just a charge, okay? But as a juror, as I'm sitting here as a 13th juror, that's my reaction. And you couple that with the stuff from last week that we heard. Remember, his wife testified that he had kept under, and we learned that he kept this box, the security box in his van with sex toolbox,
right,
sex toys and insulin, which was hers, and she said it had no reason to be there. And so what is it used for? To incapacitate victims?
So is the silver van the silver lining in this case? Like, what's the smoking gun?
Great thing, because there's been a silver van in every case, right?
Every case, that's a common thread.
The silver van, and especially in Harenga, where they saw, where the co-worker drove up on a motorcycle and saw a silver van, and now you have a silver van, and the police go searching for a silver van, and sure, they have 1,000 possible silver vans that they could know, and it comes back to this guy who's connected in 3 cases,
right,
and he just happens the victim's on his computer.
But it is this victim that we're listening to now, Madison Nygaard. They pulled all the vans and the ownerships, and that's how she ID'd this victim,
right,
or this defendant, which then led to the Rebecca Blech cold case being resolved with a conviction, right, and now this current trial.
And the search warrants where they found his computer and the list where he had initials of the victims on his computer. Now, what's the chance of that happening?
Right. So what Linda's referring to here, just for a quick recap of those of you joining us, when she says lists on the computers with victims and files, this is a circumstantial evidence case. The prosecution is building a circumstantial case against Jeffrey Willis, the man accused of kidnapping and murdering Jessica Harenga back in April of 2013, 5 years ago. We have almost no physical direct evidence. This is a circumstantial case with an unlikable defendant. The prosecution has found syringes of insulin, a gun, a toolbox with sex toys, restraining devices in the van, cleaning supplies in the basement of his grandfather's house, of bleach and Tide. All of these circumstantial evidentiary pieces to help build a case of why Jeffrey Willis is guilty of abducting and killing Jessica Harenga by showing a common theme, a common thread. Before we jump back, I just want to ask you real quickly, Linda, what do you think do you think that there's enough of a common thread with this circumstantial evidence to prove, that he is a serial killer? Or a better question is this common for serial killers to have a common, a thread, an ID mark, or traits that they
Yes.
do in multiple
Yes, it is
crimes.
very common to have some type of threat. And you think about it in a non-serial killer case. Think about Bill Cosby, right? The doctrine of chances. What was the chance that all these women are going to complain that he sexually molested them? What is the chance that this silver van and this guy would be connected to all these? And remember, with Haringa, the co-worker who passed by saw somebody in the driver's seat, and he had blonde-tipped hair, okay, something that I used to have, but now I'm back to my normal color. But he had blonde-tipped hair, and sure enough, the prosecution brings in his hairdresser to say at that point he had blonde-tipped hair. So you have all these little tiny pieces, and pretty soon you have a big puzzle that comes together and only points to him.
That's thank you, Linda Baden, criminal defense attorney. Great insight here. Let's go back into the courtroom and listen to some more testimony of the third victim, the teen that linked all of these crimes together with a positive ID of the defendant, Jeffrey Willis, and what she has to say. Let's listen in. Welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. I'm Carissa Kranz, and we are watching closely the Jeffrey Willis murder trial out of Michigan. Also, a special welcome to our Sirius XM radio listeners. And we have a guest who is with us today. If you're just joining, this is Linda Kenney Baden. She's a criminal defense attorney. She takes cases all over the country.
Yes.
So, Linda, we are listening right now to testimony from Madison Nygaard. She is a victim in another case, allegedly, by the same defendant who is standing trial right now on Jessica Haringa's case. For those of you just joining us, a quick recap. This is the case. It is where the Jeffrey Willis was already convicted of murder of Rebecca Bletch, and he is now standing trial for murder and kidnapping of Jessica Haringa, a 25-year-old mother who went missing from her job back in 2013, 5 years ago, and we still have no dead body and very little evidence except circumstantial evidence. And one of the key circumstantial evidence that we have is this other victim, Madison Nygaard, who is on the stand testifying, which is what we're listening to right now and what you just heard if you were tuned in with us, where she explains what she experienced with Jeffrey Willis before she escaped, which helped link him to these other murders. Back in the studio here, Linda.
Yes.
What do you make of all this? How's it going for him? And why is the judge allowing in this other testimony?
Well, the judge is allowing it in because it connects the other two victims, and it also shows a pattern of practice about how these other crimes would have come down or have occurred. It is not going well for Willis, let me put it to you that way. And the Sirius XM listeners are hearing exactly what we're hearing, because we can't see her face, but we can listen to her tone and her inflection. And she's talking about how he drove up to her, right?
Right.
And that would have happened to Bletch and Haringa probably too in the gas station.
Yes.
And then he had a conversation. And then obviously, they're in the van.
Right.
Next thing happens.
She builds the picture of what he could do if he got to take it one step further. What she doesn't get to talk about is the tools that were found in the car, the insulin that may have been used to incapacitate victims,
That's right,
to take advantage of them and restrain them. But there's a lot of ongoing testimony and things to consider. How do you think the jury's taking this?
Well, the jury, when they saw the sex toys last week, was pretty riveting courtroom testimony. You don't normally see that, because then you're seeing handcuffs and all. And it was they were in a toolbox. They were in the van where he is taking his victims. Obviously, Bletch was outside. Obviously, a car had come up to her. This poor young lady was outside. The van came up to her. And obviously, Haringa was in the gas station when that silver van drove up to her with that toolbox, which is probably in there, locked with those items of destruction for women.
I'm just going to stick to this silver van being the silver lining in this case.
I love it.
So we have radio listeners right now, Sirius XM radio listeners. So for them, because they're not watching, like we're watching, we're sitting here, we're talking, we're discussing, we're looking at the screen. What do you make of the defense table? As we were listening to this testimony, I know you said to me when we were quieted on our mics, they're frenetic right now. that doesn't look good. That's never a good sign. What does that mean? Why do you think they're frenetic?
Right. When we were watching, for the listeners, the defense table, there were people coming up, going around, standing up, showing a picture which was clearly a drawing of Willis's face, and they were going back and forth. You never want, when there's a victim on the stand like that, to do that in front of a defense table. It looks terrible. It looks terrible.
It looks like they're falling apart.
It looks like either one, they're trying to distract against her, which is not good, or two, they're falling apart. Either one is not a good look. You have to be so aware when you're trying a case what is happening at the defense table, because you know that jury is watching them maybe even more than they're listening to the victim.
And I think that's exactly right in what they were trying to do. They are trying to distract the jury from listening to this victim and hoping that they won't have attention on this other victim, which the defense is going to say isn't related. That's a different crime, and the prosecution hasn't proved the case against my defendant this time around. But I don't think, as a former prosecutor, and you're a criminal defense attorney,
and former prosecutor too.
Okay, so this doesn't look good for the defendant. But we got to jump back into this clip and listen to more testimony. We are listening to testimony from Detective Zachary Sparks, and he is going over a note that was found in the garbage crumpled up at Jeffrey Willis's, the defendant's grandfather's house. His testimony is important because he is going through the items that are consistently found also in the toolbox of that silver van that Jeffrey Willis owned. Plus, we had a handwriting expert identify this note as Jeffrey Willis's handwriting. With me is criminal defense attorney Linda Baden. What do you make of all this? Is this handwriting even reliable?
Now, handwriting has been totally being attacked as being unreliable scientifically, so that really doesn't do anything for me. And the fact that there's a note at his grandfather's house really doesn't do anything for me, except for the fact that he has something called a French tickler. Now, my ignorance is going to show here. I need the expert to tell me what that is, not a handwriting expert, okay?
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
But it was underneath all the other sex things, so I assume it's related to this guy. But the fact that there's bleach and all, that's more important to me, because bleach is used for what? For cleaning up crime scenes. So that is more important to me. Because we found the items that belong to Jeffrey Willis with Jeffrey Willis's van. So the fact that he has a list of them,
So, but doesn't it make the handwriting a little bit more credible that there was a list that had these items listed, which were also found on him, in his possession, in his van?
Sure.
Items like...
Sure. It can, but how does it advance the ball to say that he then committed these crimes? That's really the question.
Oh, he has ball gags.
You definitely has ball gags along with
I think that advanced ball. I mean, so in that list, for those of you who are listening on Sirius Radio and not watching, they pulled the list up, and some of the things that were outlined were handcuffs, keys, vibrator, video equipment, gas can, matches, lube, a crowbar, ball gags, zip ties, and the French tickler,
which we're laughing about here, because obviously it's not something to laugh about, but we're kind of laughing because we need an expert.
We need an expert for that. I'm certainly not the expert on that. Yeah. Let's go back and listen into some more testimony from Zachary Sparks, detective. You're listening to testimony live. We have a live feed in the courtroom in the Jeffrey Willis trial out of Michigan. Jeffrey Willis is on trial. Note, this is his second trial. He's already been convicted of murder for Rebecca Blech, and now he is standing trial for the abduction and murder of Jessica Haranga, a gas station attendant who disappeared 5 years ago and whose body has never been found. This is a circumstantial evidence case. The prosecution is trying to build its case and connect the dots based on circumstantial evidence. After this break, we're going to have to go into it in a minute. We're going to go into cross-examination. Real quickly before the break, we have only a few seconds. If you were the defense attorney, what would you ask?
You didn't find any bleach in the defendant's van or in any of the crime scenes. That's it.
That's it? That's a smoking gun?
Done. I'm done.
Okay, stick with us. After this break, we're going to go into cross-examination and see if the defense attorney asks that question. Stay tuned. You're watching the Jeffrey Willis trial. We are following this really closely. Coming up next will be the cross-examination of Detective Sparks, Zachary Sparks. We just listened to some direct questioning, and we have a live feed in the courtroom. It looks like they're about to start soon on some cross-examination. Just before break, we had a discussion with our criminal defense attorney. Linda, what was the one question you said earlier you would ask?
Well, what I'd ask him is that you didn't find any indication of bleach in the van, did you? You didn't find bleach at the Blesh crime scene. You didn't find bleach here with the woman who just testified. So what are we hearing all this bleach about? See, obviously he's trying to indicate, the prosecution, that there was bleach used to cover up the Haringa death wherever she was killed. So we may hear more about that, but I think you've got to bring it to each of the individual crimes.
And what about the letter? Would you bring up anything on cross on that crumpled up note that was found?
There's nothing in here illegal, right? There's nothing in here illegal. Matter of fact, you know what these items are. Let them, you know what they are. There's nothing illegal in those items.
And what would you say those items could be used for? I mean, sex toys,
there's sex toys,
balls, handcuffs.
Well, you know, there's dominatrix.
Videos.
There's all sorts of legal ways to use those, not illegal ways. That's what the defense has to bring out. Now, is it a lot? Is it good? No, it's not great, but it's the only argument you have. And I have to say, I've been bashing about the defense, but this defense attorney is very nice. He's got a nice method to him, but he doesn't have much to work with.
Okay, let's go to a replay of the cross-examination of Zachary Sparks in the courtroom now, and let's see if he asks these questions that we all want to know. Thanks for sticking with us. This is Willis's second murder trial out of Michigan. The defendant is accused of kidnapping and murdering Jessica Haringa, a 25-year-old mother who went missing during her shift at an ExxonMobil gas station nearly 5 years ago, and we still have no dead body. This is a circumstantial evidence case, and right now we are listening to testimony in the courtroom with a live feed to follow and break in at any moment with anything else that's interesting. Also with me on set is Kenney Baden. Linda, if you were the defense attorney on this case, would you let him testify?
Well, I may have no control, because one of the three decisions a defendant can make is whether to testify. And if they want to testify, you cannot prevent them from testifying. And we know he testified in the previous case. So his mentality...
Which he was found guilty.
Right, but his mentality is, I want to tell a story. You know, he wants to be in control.
Would you recommend it, or would you just...
Never.
You would not
never.
Don't talk.
No, don't talk. Never recommend it. You know, the defense attorney in this job really had to separate these cases out, because if you take Haringa alone, there's not much that connects him to Haringa, Willis to Haringa. But when you sandwich it between Blesh, which we know he was convicted of, but the jury's not supposed to know, and the teenage victim who was kidnapped, then there's a lot to work with.
Right, because now we have all the circumstantial evidence that's coming in. We have common themes. We have the silver van. We have things that were used. We have the victim's folders on computers. We have handwriting evidence. We have bleach that's found in basements. So all of it together does seem to build a case. But taking it all separately is a much harder task to prove.
That's right, because what you have a silver van going to the Exxon station. Before you have the computer, you have the silver-tipped hair, the gold-tipped hair of him. You have a receipt from earlier that has his name on her name on his bedside, but he bought gas there, so what?
Well, we've already established he's a creep.
Oh, he's definitely a creep.
He's unlikable. He's a creep. We have a mystery murder that we are trying to solve without a body, which... I mean, how easy or hard is it to prove a murder when you don't have a body?
Well, it used to be much more difficult, but there's been so many cases where murders have been proven now without a body. You have to first prove the death, that she's that she's dead, but
in this case, the mother won't even accept that her own child is dead. So if the mom won't accept that her own child is dead and is still holding out hope, and you can't blame a mom for holding out hope.
No, you cannot.
But how can a jury? Well, I just got notice that we have to go back into the courtroom. We have a live feed right now, and a witness is taking the stand. So let's listen in on this witness and what he has to say and why his testimony is important. This is the Jeffrey Willis trial, and out of Michigan, and what you're hearing right now is testimony from Ryan Heathis. He's a Secret Service agent who is helping link the van and the gun and other items to the murder of Jessica Haringa and linking it with the other evidence of the murder of Rebecca Blech, which he was already convicted and found guilty of, and then the kidnapping and where he was held 18 at gunpoint, all of this silver van and silver lining evidence is being connected by the Secret Service agent. So for those of you just joining us now, that's what we're listening to in the Jeffrey Willis trial out of Michigan. It's his second murder case, and this is key testimony in trying to link this circumstantial evidence case with the other alleged crimes and convicted crimes in order to prove this one. Let's take a look back into the courtroom and see what he has to say. We are closely following the Jeffrey Willis trial, and you are listening to live testimony in the courtroom from a Secret Service agent who is trying to link the Jessica Hringa murder with other circumstantial evidence in order to prove this crime. We're going to go to a quick break, but please stay with us because we will come back and continue to dissect this and this witness's analysis in the studio based on what's going on in the courtroom live. See you soon.
Okay, Joseph Santoro, I work for the warrant squad, and you are now under arrest. We know there's warrants out on you. No, I'm kidding. Don't worry, Joe. You got at least 10 minutes before the cops come.
I need a cavity search.
Well, not by me. Maybe the cameraman. You know what? This is totally BS. Literally, with Bill Stanton saying, have a great and safe day.
Bullshit.
I'm Law&Crime's Heather Hansen. I've been defending medical malpractice cases for over 20 years and have been named one of the top 50 trial attorneys in Pennsylvania. I'm also a trained mediator and a communications consultant working with people to become better advocates for themselves. I love being a host at Law&Crime because I love interacting with the audiences and finding out what they think is important in the cases. Not only is it interesting, it helps me in my own work with juries.
Welcome back to the Law&Crime Network. I'm your host, Carissa Kranz, and a special welcome to those on Sirius Radio. We are following the Jeffrey Willis trial out of Michigan. This is his second murder trial. This is for Jessica Hringa, the mother who went missing nearly 5 years ago, and we still don't have a body, just a drop of blood that was found outside the ExxonMobil station where she was working. Right now, we are listening to live trial testimony from a witness on the prosecution side, Ryan Heathis, a Secret Service agent who is trying to do detective work in order to link this crime based on other crimes the defendant has allegedly or confirmed committed. Let's take a look. We're hearing live testimony in the courtroom in the Jeffrey Willis murder trial, the Michigan case where Jessica Hringa is missing still and allegedly murdered, though we do not have a dead body. This is a circumstantial evidence case, and that is Ryan Heathis, a Secret Service agent on the stand. With me on set is criminal defense attorney Kenney Baden. Linda, first of all, quick reaction on this. I mean, why is his testimony important? It's not an emotional testimony. He's not a prior victim. It's very factual of him trying to link evidence together.
But it's so important, Carissa, because it's good old-fashioned police work. First, it narrowed down 32,000 vans to 32, and then the victim picked out him out of the 32 people, and now we have a receipt 1 mile from when Jessica Hringa went
Right, so that's a key piece of testimony that was just, if you were listening, those who are joining us on Sirius Radio and listening, and those welcome to the Law&Crime Network, you can see everything here. There was a receipt, a Taco Bell receipt, which places him there at 12:30, and that Taco Bell was across the street from the ExxonMobil gas station where the victim went missing at around 11 p.m. So now we have a receipt that placed him very, very close to the crime scene. I just got news that we are now on cross-examination in the courtroom, so let's go back in live and take a look and see if there's anything else interesting. We're back. Thank you for sticking with us. That was a quick witness and some quick testimony. Some takeaway points there that seemed to be critical was the Taco Bell receipt. The Taco Bell receipt was at 12:34 a.m. and Jeffrey Willis's credit card was linked to that receipt. Specifically, the victim, Jessica Kranz, went missing at the ExxonMobil gas station on April 26th at about 11 p.m. So this places the defendant, Jeffrey Willis, across the street in the area, basically at the scene, in addition to other eyewitness testimony of his van being at the scene around that time frame. Now, what I want to know, but I haven't heard it come out into testimony, and maybe, Linda, you can help me out here. Criminal defense attorney Linda is with me today. Thank you for being here. I want to know, part of his story and his narrative was that he was going to his grandfather's house at about 12:30 a.m. to get something for his dogs or something. I don't remember exactly what it was. So is this Taco Bell on the way or en route, or does this poke holes into his stories and, you know, bring up inconsistencies?
Well, I think cross-examination proved it was not on the way because, as a matter of fact, in cross-examination, the defense attorney said, well, you know, you can go to one closer to where you're going or your house, whatever, that's 7 miles away. Maybe it's closed and it doesn't have a Kentucky Fried Chicken attached to it. And then you go to another. What do? Well, you go to another one. Well, so I think he just proved what the prosecution was saying, that this Taco Bell is right across where she was kidnapped, Ms. Syringa, and that this defendant was in the area at the time of her kidnapping.
What I would have found to have been helpful is if they put up like an aerial view of here's the grandfather's house, here's Taco Bell,
right,
and shown that it clearly wasn't on the way, because even though he left the stand right now, I have no sense of direction. I am totally directionally challenged, but I don't have a clear sense. If I was a juror right now, I would want to know, well, in proximity, I mean, is it possible?
Yeah, but they live in the, remember, these jurors are local. They live in the area. They know the area. And what's more important is that, remember, he's also even the receipt if you're the prosecution. He's got 3 tacos, a cinnamon stick, and one Mountain Dew. Is that for one person? Is that for 2 persons? Was he planning on feeding Syringa when she woke up before he did whatever he had to do with her? I mean, it leaves all sorts of things in your mind that even the radio listeners can try to decide, just like the jurors can try to decide. But this good old-fashioned police work, this van is one of the 32 that had both a gun attached to it and a silver van. It turns out the teenage victim identified Willis, and then we find Willis is in the area specifically of the ExxonMobil station with his van.
Thank you, Linda. We're commenting on a Secret Service agent's testimony. It seems like his bombshell evidence was that Taco Bell receipt and linking the defendant, Jeffrey Willis, to the crime scene and in that area on that day in question and on that night in question. We're going to go to a quick break. But please do stay with us. We're going to continue following this trial real closely, live in the courtroom and live on set. This is the Jeffrey Willis trial out of Michigan for the murder of Jessica Kranz, and that was testimony from Susan Elliott Mosley, a customer at Exxon gas station, who gives testimony about a creepy dude that made her feel uncomfortable, and those were her quotes, creepy dude, that gave her a bad vibe and made her uncomfortable to go there to buy a lighter. With me on set is criminal defense attorney Linda Baden. Linda, why is this testimony being allowed in? I didn't hear her identify the defendant, so this seems purely speculative.
Right. I didn't
Is
hear
this
her.
more prejudicial?
I didn't hear ID the defendant, and I didn't hear her say there was a silver van out there. There was a white van and a brown and a Roto-Rooter truck and a brown van. So I don't know unless the prosecution has some receipt from him that he purchased gas at the time that she's saying this creepy dude was in the gas station. So there has to be something else that ties this in.
And one thing that's really interesting for those of you just joining us that we should all bring up is that there are no cameras. There's no surveillance video at this gas station, which seems so unusual. I mean, any attorney that, prosecutes a case, whether it's a civil case or a criminal case, you send out letters of representation and spoliation letters putting premises, putting other parties on notice to preserve any and all surveillance video. In this case, there is no video to save and to review and to look at. So we truly are just relying on other people's evidence and circumstantial evidence and testimony and this van that keeps appearing. We're going to now listen into some testimony from Jessica's co-worker who saw the van on the night in question in the parking lot. She did not go to the Exxon gas station to figure out why the van was there, but something didn't sit right with her. And let's listen into why she felt and took special note that night of this silver van in the back of the gas station. That is testimony from Jessica's co-worker who saw the van, the silver van, in the parking lot that night and didn't know why it was there. As you can see, for those of you listening in and not watching, she started to break down and cry. It's almost as if she had a little bit of guilt for not doing anything that night. She said something wasn't right, something didn't sit right, but she just turned a blind eye and let it go. And now it seems to me that she has a little guilt. Just a quick recap before some studio analysis. This is the Willis murder case out of Michigan. The defendant, this is his second trial, and he is accused of the abduction and murder of Jessica Herringa. He was already convicted of the abduction or the murder of Rebecca Bletch in 2014, a mother and a jogger, and he is awaiting trial for a teen abduction, Madison Nygaard. With me, Linda, what do you make of all this? Let's a quick reaction. I mean, it still seems to keep coming back to the silver van.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, all this circumstantial evidence of different people placing him there, no cameras actually putting him there because the cameras weren't working. But we do have all these different circumstantial evidence or evidentiary pieces to place him there. We have testimony. I mean, it doesn't look good, and he's not a likable guy. But what's
right.
your reaction?
And remember, Jessica Herringa was never seen again after that silver van is in that Exxon station. She's never seen. She's never turned up. She's never charged anything.
But
she's never
no
called her
DNA
mother.
on there.
But it doesn't really matter. DNA. People think that all cases are DNA. They're not. This is a very, very good case for circumstantial evidence. It comes back to the silver van with the man with the gold tip hair and who's buying a Taco Bell right across the street. And we know it also all comes back to him. That's the issue. That's what happens here. And that's why it's an incredible circumstantial case.
Also, behind the gas station that night, in addition to the silver van, there was that drop of blood, which was linked to Jessica Herringa.
Right.
So there is a tiny piece of DNA evidence, but it's not in the van.
It's not in the van. But we know she's there, and we know she could have been stuck with a syringe. Anything could have happened. That blood could have been from anything.
Right.
But
so,
she has been gone since.
So speaking of the syringe, for people that are just joining us, there was a toolbox kit that was found in these vans with items such as insulin, restraining devices, sex toys, things that the defendant, Jeffrey Willis, could use to tie up these victims, incapacitate them, take advantage of them.
And a ball gag, which is used to gag somebody so they can't scream, right? So there's a lot of indicia here that he has something. Certainly he has all the accoutrements. Certainly we know he's convicted of a prior murder. The silver van, to me, is it. It is, as you say, it is the silver lining. You add the Secret Service agent, which puts him right there, and D.B. Cooper was a 1971 case. There's nothing to do with this. This is about Jessica Herringa being missing and Kenney connected to Willis, and I think they have.
And is there any piece of evidence you think the jury's waiting to hear?
No, I don't think so. I think the jury's heard enough right now. I think they have it all, to be honest with you. I don't think the prosecution needs anything else.
All right, Linda, thank you for joining us. I know you have to go back to work and practice law, so we appreciate your time. And we're going to go to a quick break. Please stay with us. We're going to continue an in-close and live feed into the courtroom for the Willis murder trial out of Michigan. Stay tuned, and we will be back.